Well, good afternoon, one and all. I hope nobody has to tell me, you have to unmute, Karen. Welcome back to yet another wonderful edition of our Lunch and Learn speaker series. And this series is called A View from the Bench. And we got the head honcho today. I'm so excited that we're going to hear from him today. Earlier this month, we heard from Chief Justice Ann Burke of the Illinois Supreme Court, where she simply discussed her journey to the bench, as well as technological and procedural advances in the Illinois Supreme Court. What an interesting peek behind the curtain, wasn't it? I mean, I was thrilled. I really was. While criminal justice and our court systems are not a direct responsibility that I have as clerk, I firmly believe that continued and ongoing efforts to reform and educate and advocate on behalf of our justice system are imperative in all of our lives. And it's something that needs to be talked about at every level of our community here in Cook County. And that's why I'm so happy to introduce our next speaker, who is Chief Judge Timothy C. Evans, who's going to give us a better picture of the role of the circuit court and what role he plays in upholding justice in our community, as well as in all Cook County. Welcome. Welcome, Judge Evans. I'm glad that you had a few moments to spend with us today to talk to not just the Rotary folks, but people from the Cook County Clerk's office. We're neighbors because you're right across the street from where I am, and yet I don't get to see your smiling face very often, but I don't touch the criminal justice system much at all anyway. So, Chief Judge Evans is a graduate of the University of Illinois. He received his JD from the John Marshall Law School in Chicago in 1969. Once he graduated, he embarked on a lifelong pursuit of public service. He first entered local city government in 1969, where he joined the City of Chicago's law department as an assistant corporation counsel. Later, he joined the City of Chicago's Department of Investigations, rising to deputy commissioner. In '73, he was elected to the Chicago City Council, representing the 4th Ward, a position he held for 18 years while maintaining a private practice. Lots of hats for you. In 92, he won an election to the Cook County Judiciary as a circuit judge, and within 3 short years of joining the court, he was appointed to the presiding judge of the Domestic Relations Division. 5 years later, in 2000, he was appointed presiding judge of the Law Division, where he served until his election as Chief Judge. Chief Judge Evans was first elected as Chief Judge September 2001 by a unanimous vote of the city judges. Only the 4th person to serve as Chief Judge of the Circuit Court of Cook County. He's also the first African American to serve in this position. In his position, he presides over the largest of the 24 judicial circuits in Illinois, also one of the largest unified court systems in the world. I said in the world. More than 1 million cases are filed annually in the Circuit Court of Cook County, which serves Cook County's 5.1 million residents. He oversees the circuit's approximately 400 judges, who he assigns throughout the court's 10 divisions and 6 geographical districts. I think everybody here knows that Cook County is a really large county. He also oversees an annual budget of $240 million and approximately 3,000 employees who work in 15 non-judicial offices providing probate and other court-related services. Judge Evans, again, thank you so much for being here with us. Again, I know how busy your schedule, I keep up with you, so I know how busy your schedule is, but I want to welcome you to A View from the Bench. speaker series. And first of all, I'd just like you to add anything you'd like to add about your career. I mean, where did you grow up?
Well, thank you very much, Clerk Karen Yarborough. It's a pleasure to be here with you and our colleagues from the Rotary Club, as well as all of the members of your staff who've been very gracious and kind, working with my office down through the years. And it's a pleasure to be here with you and with them. I also want to thank Ms. Daggett for the invitation. She conveyed the invitation to me from you and has kept my office informed as to the time and all of the important things for us to connect today. I am particularly happy, of course, to talk about the work that we do here in Cook County. And as you said, it's a very busy office. There's only one larger office than ours in the whole world, as you pointed out. And that is in LA County in California. Other than that, we're larger than all the other unified court systems in the world. And yes, we are quite busy. But the point I'd like to make is that, like your office, Clerk Yarborough, we are interested in carrying out the functions of our offices, but there is something that I'm hoping to talk to you and to your employees about a little bit today, and that is maintaining our democratic republic. We have some ministerial activities that we carry out in our court system. We supply interpreters, we supply court reporters and adult probation officers, juvenile probation officers, social service probation officers. We provide our judges with forensic analysis from psychiatrists and psychologists. We provide them with legal research. But more than anything else, when I get to this democratic republic that I'm talking about, we are talking about, for example, providing free representation to any resident of Cook County who gets arrested, no matter where they get arrested, and no matter what their financial status is, whether they are well-financed or whether they're indigent. We provide free legal representation for them in Cook County. And I'm not aware of any other county that does that. And let me tell you why I did it here. We have seen many instances where people get convicted in our system and they spend years in court and in jail upon being convicted, only for us to discover 20, 30 years, 40 years later that they didn't do what they were accused of doing. And in many instances, I found out as chief judge that those things occur when they're being questioned at the time of the arrest. There's no lawyer there generally, and frequently they say things that somebody might interpret later as contributing to their criminality. But when we took a look at it, just to give you some idea, one year there were 86,000 such arrests in Cook County. And out of the 86,000 arrests, only 1,000 of the people who got arrested had legal counsel at the time that they were questioned. So that's what I mean about trying to make certain that we have a democratic republic that recognizes that our citizens are to be presumed innocent at the time that they are arrested. And so that was one of the things that we did to try to help people get the representation that they needed at the time that they might be, quote unquote, said to confess, when in actuality, they didn't confess at all, and they had no legal representation to tell them what their rights were. So that's one of the things that my office does. We provide this free representation that I reference here. And that is through the public defender's office, so that there is no cost to the people who get the free representation. And the police departments have to provide a telephone number for the arrestees to call to get this help whenever they get arrested. And some people ask me, Clerk Yarborough, well, when I get stopped by the police, am I automatically under arrest? When is it that I become entitled to this free representation? Sometimes we don't know if we are under arrest. I give them a very simple test. I say, if you are stopped by the police and you are not free to leave, you are under arrest. And that's when you need a lawyer before you start making statements. A second thing we do, for example, to protect our democratic republic, places us in a kind of contested position with respect to our law enforcement officials. And I have great respect for them. I pray for them. I know what a challenging job they have. And they work, generally speaking, under the local mayor. So like the local mayor here in Chicago, the superintendent of police and all of the police officers work under the local mayors throughout Cook County. And one tension that we have is this, and I know how hard the police officers work. They see a crime has been committed and they do their investigation. They might, for example, go to the scene of a crime, and they might have fingerprints that they can tie to a given individual. Or they might find the fibers from that individual's coat or whatever the person is wearing. Or they might have some other evidence that convinces them that the person that they arrested is guilty. And they believe in many instances, not all, but many say, well, I've arrested the guy. I've got the proof that he did what he's been accused of doing. And we want to keep that person in jail. We got him. And why should we let him go? Well, my job as the judge is to remind them, yes, police officer, you are convinced that the person you arrested did the crime. But we don't, in the law, leave it up to you to be the judge and the jury. All you are is the accuser. And our law says that there is a presumption of innocence whenever anybody is arrested, no matter what the evidence is. And the only exceptions are these, and that is when the proof is evident and the presumption is great that the crime that somebody was accused of was committed by the defendant who is under arrest, and it's a felony, but also that there is a clear and present threat or danger that that person poses on the community while their case is preliminarily being reviewed. Only then can we deny somebody bail. And many people don't understand that. They say, oh, well, wait a minute. The police just arrested this guy and he's on the street the very next day. Well, that's because the punishment does not start when you get arrested. The punishment can only take place after you've had a full trial and you've been found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Only then is punishment appropriate. So this gives me an opportunity to talk to our friends at the Rotary Club and our friends in the clerk's office to try to spread that message. And the same person who we let out pending the trial, if and when he is convicted, he then can be sent away for many years, life sometimes, if it's murder or something like that, 20 years to life. So that's one of the things that this opportunity that you've given me, Clerk Yarborough, gives me an opportunity to explain these kinds of things and share it with those who are in our audience today.
You know, I'm glad that you've done that, because I know the work that I did on the abolition of the death penalty, I certainly had to answer questions from people along the same lines. In many cases, it's just like you said, people are presumed innocent unless they have a trial and what have you. But sometimes, and all we have to do is go backward and we could see that there on death row, there were a whole lot of folks that were there who they are on trumped up charges and any number of things. And so there are times, and then there are times that, and the system needs to work for everyone. Obviously, if you put someone to death, there's no coming back. You know, you can't say, oops, right, you made a mistake. And in the same case of what you're saying, so somebody gets accused of something and, you know, immediately they're like, oh, we need to put him in not jail, but prison. They want to put him in prison, and they want to have every rung of criminal justice to weigh in. Forget about all that. We know he did it. Get him out of here. And that's what communities, of course, say. And so I'm glad that you shared that with us, that there is a system in place to make sure that people get a fair shake. They can have an attorney. They can have a trial. They can be found guilty or not guilty or whatever. But I mean, this is America, I think, and there's a reason for all of these things. So thank you.
I commend you for the work that you did on the abolition of the death penalty here in Illinois, and it took courage to do that, Clerk. And you were in the legislature at the time, if I remember correctly, and you stood strong on that. And as you point out, many times after somebody is convicted and sentenced to death, we find out, hey, he didn't do it at all. And DNA testing, for example, has made that possible. We can only guess how many people were put to death before DNA could show that no matter what the eyewitness said, no matter what the fingerprints appeared to say, they were innocent all along. And one of the things that I would rush to say that our system is set up to do with this presumption of innocence is to give the accused an opportunity to help him prepare his defense, work with his lawyer. But also, if he is locked up just because he got arrested, he can't keep the job, so he loses his job. If he's married, he can't support his wife, he can't support his children. If he is, let's say, a custodian of his children, he loses custody of his children, all while he's presented with innocence and presumed to be innocent. And under the system that we have been against, this money bail system, it was more along the lines of how much money you have, whether you got out pre-trial or whether you stayed in jail pre-trial. If you could be as guilty as sin and be a millionaire and get out all the time under money bail, and you could be as innocent as you could possibly be, but be impoverished, and you'd have to stay in jail the whole time that you are presumed innocent. So the work that you and I have done down through the years as members of an elected body before we are in the positions that we are in now, still maintain and provide the cornerstone of this democratic republic that I'm talking about. Let me tell you one additional thing that I'm here for today, because I recognize all of the good work that is being done by your office. The clerk does many things. You keep the birth records and the marriage records and the death records. You keep all the records for county government. You take pains to make sure you keep the property records and the liens, and you collect transfer taxes, and you even store veterans' discharge records if they request it. It is amazing what you do. But here is what I want to talk about. You guys also protect and oversee suburban elections in this county. And you protect the voting rights of all of the residents in this suburban community. That is where the democratic republic gets protected. And I'm telling you that without your protection, we have a dangerous situation on the horizon. And I came to discuss that dangerous horizon for a moment. Most of us know that the Shelby County case that was determined by the United States Supreme Court removed the heart out of our Voting Rights Act of 1965. That's already been done. And what that did was it identified 9 states that everybody knew had violated the rights of minorities and others. Down through the years, they prevented people from registering, not only preventing them from voting, but they wouldn't even let them register. People were being killed just to register. And that's why that law was passed in the first place. And what I'm saying is that Shelby County, the same county where the Edmund Pettus Bridge is located, where people got knocked down and run over, trying to get the right just to register to vote. And Dr. King came to the area and walked from the Edmund Pettus Bridge all the way in town so that we could have rights to register and to vote. And based upon that, this law was passed in 1965, the Voting Rights Act. But what I'm saying is that same county challenged that law and said that that aspect of it should be thrown out. And the aspect of it that I'm talking about is what was called the pre-clearance part of it. These 9 states, like Alabama, could not reduce the rights of people to register or rights of the people to vote or anything else unless they pre-cleared that with the Department of Justice or a 3-panel federal court. They couldn't just automatically change the rules. And that was in place since 1965. What I'm saying is that's no longer in place. It was thrown out. And so now we have to look to the clerk of the suburban elections to make sure that that kind of thing does not happen here in Illinois. Just like you stopped them from carrying out these capital sentences for people who were innocent. I got to commend you for keeping an eye out on the kind of thing that could happen. Now, I mentioned 9 states that had to, in effect, tell us what they wanted to do before they did it. so that the harm couldn't be done before they did the harm. They now can do the harm, and they don't have to tell us in advance what the harm is going to be. And I'd like to tell those on this particular call that 5 of the 9 states have already started doing it. And I suspect what they are starting to do in other states will be coming to places like Illinois. And that's why we've got to watch it so closely. Just to give your audience an opportunity to hear some of the things that are being proposed. They want to eliminate or limit sending mail ballot applications to voters who do not specifically request them. Second, they want to eliminate or limit sending mail ballots themselves to voters who do not specifically request the ballots. They want to limit the number, the location, the availability of mail ballot drop boxes. Fourth, they want to impose stricter signature requirements for mailing ballots. 5, they want to impose harsher voter ID requirements for mailing in the vote. 6, they want to impose harsher voter ID requirements for in-person voting. 7, they want to increase the barriers for voters with disabilities. Can you imagine? These people are already disabled and they want to increase the number of barriers for them. They want to eliminate election day registration. They want to eliminate the right to provide snacks or water to people who are waiting in line to vote. They want to limit early voting days and hours. So I'm telling you that there are dangers on the horizon. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to be here today, because I know we've got a brilliant clerk, a courageous clerk, and I know that you and your staff will be on the lookout for anything like that they try to do to stop our suburban voters from being able to exercise their right to vote. And as the clerk has said, and she's modest, so I'll say it, there's nobody better qualified to lead that fight than Clerk Karen Yarborough. She has served in the state legislature. We've been talking about what she did down there. But not only that, for an interim period of time, in an acting capacity, she was the chair of the Illinois Democratic Party. And she knows these games, and she knows that these people who are trying to carry out this reduction of voting rights are the people who say that Biden didn't win. That's where this is coming from. These people say that Biden didn't win and that Trump won. And they're coming up with all of this nonsense to try to carry forth that kind of a process. And they think they can get away with it because they've already knocked out the major provision of the Voting Rights Act that I talked about. But let me just say, and most people know this, but let me just repeat it, because this democratic republic that I'm talking about, that we're so proud of and that we live in every day, is not something that is automatically there. It is precious and it is vulnerable. It's not across the world that we have a democratic republic. It's rare that we have a democratic republic across the world. And there are all kinds of things that can take this democratic republic away from us. Things like corruption and poverty and economic insecurity and dangers from violence and oppression, but also things like the loss of the right to vote. That can torpedo the democratic republic that I'm talking about. And I just want you to know that we're not alone in this particular fight. There are others in these other states that are looking at it very closely also. People like Ms. Abrams in Georgia. And everybody knows the hard work she did in registering people and getting people to vote. As a result of her work, you had 2 new Democratic senators elected in Georgia, and Biden carried that southern state, the same place where all of these people in the past, including Dr. King and all of those people who lived in Georgia, could not even register. So we're not alone in this. People like Ms. Abrams are working on it all the time. Stacey Abrams has not decided whether she will run again for governor of Georgia, but she is still continuing to try to push back on these things that I've announced as might harm our democratic republic. Now, let me just say this about that case, that Shelby County case versus Holder, that removed some of the protection that we had under the Voting Rights Act. There was a dissenting number of our justices. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was the one who wrote the dissent against what the majority did. And she pointed out several things. They were irrefutable, but nevertheless, she lost that vote. She pointed out, for example, a statement that comes from Shakespeare. Shakespeare wrote 400 years ago a play called The Tempest. And in The Tempest, he said, what's past is prologue. What that means is the things that you do today have to be based on what happened before today. And that's what this law did. It protected rights of voting that had not been available in the past. And she pointed that out. And then secondly, she pointed out something that is often misquoted, but it's absolutely true. She said, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And she pointed it out, and the majority still pulled the rug out from under what she was trying to do. And one other example, and I don't want to example you to death, but her logic was so clear. She points out to do what they did in our country is like in California saying that they don't need to prepare for earthquakes in the future, ignoring the fact that you've had any number of earthquakes in California. And another example she gave was like saying you're walking in a rainstorm and you have your umbrella up and you're dry and you say, oh, well, I'm dry, I guess I'll put my umbrella away, as if you're ignoring the fact that the only reason you're dry is you got the umbrella up. And what they did in that case, Clerk Yarborough, is they took our umbrella away. And I'm saying that the consent of the governed is extremely important. And that's why the work that your office does as clerk, protecting the voting rights of our suburban citizens, is so crucial. We cannot have a democratic republic without the work that you do in protecting their rights to vote. And this is not something I'm just saying. This provision is in our proclamation, the Declaration of our Independence. It's right there, that it depends upon the consent of the governed. And that consent of the governed is through the vote. That's the only way those who are governed, that is to say the citizens who are governed by those of us who are elected, the only way we have the right to govern them is they give us their consent by voting for us. So it's the consent of the governed that our country is based on. And if nobody wants to go all the way back to the Declaration of Independence, I would just point out to you what a guy named Abraham Lincoln said. He said that no man is good enough to govern another man without the other man's consent. Once again, that's the consent of the government. So that's what I'm here to talk about. Our two offices, yes, they're separate offices, but work we do is designed to provide a cornerstone for this democratic republic that we all benefit from. And the whole world doesn't understand it. We have to explain to people why what they see in the paper may not be true. What somebody tells them may not be true. And it isn't that we can elect or get everybody we choose to elect. We win some and we lose some. But if you don't vote, you can't possibly win. And if you don't vote, you lose people like Clerk Karen Yarborough or Chief Judge Tim Evans or any other elected official like President Biden. We all got there the same way, with the consent of the governed through their vote. And that's what we try to protect in this county. And that's why I'm so happy to be here with you today, just to thank all of your employees for the work they do.
Well,
and I wish I could say,
yeah, well, let me, you said plenty, let me tell you, and it makes us all, I think about in terms of, what you talked about here, how it impacts each and every one of our lives. I don't know whether you know or not that our office, our elections division is always looking for opportunities to expand the vote. I sometimes tell, and I just left a conference of folks from all across the United States. And it's interesting to hear from the election authorities across the state on the challenges that they have, because election officials, they're professionals. They want to make sure that everybody has the same opportunities. And many times they're handcuffed as a result of the legislature or some ruling that comes down that tells them that they can't do their job. And so I've heard from many of them in Florida, California. I just left Arizona, and one of the election authorities there, she was complaining about what's going on there. And so there's a lot going on, and we need to watch as well as pray. I mean, because just like you just finished saying, I mean, either we protect it or we'll lose it. Either you pay attention and understand, what we have in the vote, and we protect it, or maybe going back, maybe that's not any place I want to go back to. I'm not from the South, but many of the people I know who are from the South, who came up through Jim Crow and what have you, that was not a nice time in our history. And, when you look at these numbers, I picked up a book yesterday, why we don't vote. I mean, we actually have to go out there and beat the drums to encourage people, because these are freedoms that have been fought for. And shame on us if we don't understand that, because just like we got them, you just finished saying, what happened in Shelby County, they can be taken away.
Well, that is exactly right. And while I grew up here in Chicago, I went to Hirsch High School and the University of Illinois and all those things that you've already mentioned. I was born in Arkansas. Okay. And I sat in those nosebleed seats in the theaters because we could not sit with the regular people in the good seats. I rode on the back of those buses because we couldn't sit in seats that were vacant. We had to sit in the back of the bus, even if nobody else was there except us. And I lived that. I went in the back door of those stores that I had to spend my money. I say my money, of course, I was a kid. My parents had to spend their money by going in the back door of places of business. And in downtown Hot Springs, where I was born, the same city that one of our former presidents, President Clinton, grew up in. Everybody knows he was born in a city called Hope, but he grew up in the same town that I grew up in, Hot Springs, Arkansas.
Wow.
And I could not attend his school. His school was all white. My school was all black. And for example, downtown, I talked about some of the people who had to go in the back door of stores in downtown Hot Springs, a national park. We couldn't even go in the stores downtown. They wouldn't even accept our money downtown in Hot Springs, Arkansas. So I have lived it. And I assure anybody who's listening to this, they don't want to go back to those times. And it wasn't just blacks who were treated that way. It was minorities of any kind. People who came here from another country who had difficulty speaking the language, they were treated that way too.
Sure.
So I just think it's so crucial. And I was going to say, and I'm so glad to hear you say, Clerk Yarborough, that you're working on this. I was just going to say, I don't know. I guess that you don't have people coming down to your office every day applauding the work that you do to try to save their votes.
No.
My guess is you don't have that because people don't know, and frequently they don't realize until they lose what they had, how valuable it was. And so, yeah, I know they want copies of their marriage licenses, and I know they want other records, but the crucial thing you do is protect that vote. And I hope someday somebody will realize that about your office. And I just want to take this moment to thank all of your employees for what they do.
Thank you.
And I don't think they get that applause. I know they don't get $1 million a year that they need to get salary. And
Judge Evans, we actually expanded we have 12 languages on the ballot now. And so for those folks who are, whose parents in many cases who don't know English or have, they're just not, they don't have an English as their first language, but expanding the language, and we did this last year. I got to tell you, on election day, when I was out and went to some of these communities, they were so happy to be able to see their ballot in their native tongue. We want to do more in terms of expanding the vote and giving people access in the office. And as long as I'm here, we will continue to do that.
Well, I commend you for doing it. And I just am happy to know that they can see the ballot in their own home language or the home language of their parents or their grandparents. I know that is so crucial, and I commend you for doing it. And that's another thing I will say, that our office is jointly recognized. We recognize the people coming to court also need to have interpreters, and we provide the interpreters free of charge. We any language in the world, we can supply it free for anybody who has to come to court. We have regular languages in the Chicagoland area, like Polish or Spanish, or the languages that are more traditional. But any language, we have people who are our contract interpreters, and a language, let's say, that's spoken in India that they don't speak here, or a language that's spoken in Pakistan that they don't speak here, or in another part of Russia or China. We can provide that to them free of charge. That we are their court, just like you are their clerk.
Yes.
And I just want them to know that. And I know that I see there's some questions in the chat.
Yeah, I was going to get to that. I know we won't get to all of them, but maybe you could tell us what led you to your career in the law. Did you always want to be a judge? Did you always want to do public service?
Well, it's an interesting thing that led me to where I am now. As I indicated, I'm originally from Hot Springs, Arkansas, and I would be a doctor in Arkansas, but for things that happened. There was a governor there by the name of Faubus, and after Brown versus the Board of Education was passed, which would desegregate the schools all over the country, including in the South, this Governor Faubus went to Little Rock, Arkansas, Central High. Most people know about Central High, and he closed Central High School rather than desegregate it. And so the kids who would have gone to school there in Little Rock came to my city, Hot Springs, that was still open. It wasn't integrated, but at least the public schools were open. And so this guy, Governor Faubus, said, oh, well, rather than desegregate the schools in Hot Springs, we'll close them down too. And my mother, who was a teacher, said, well, that's enough, we're out of here. A slogan in Arkansas was the state of opportunity. And my mother used to say she took the first opportunity we had to get out of there. And so that's how I happened to come to Chicago. And I still wanted to be a doctor when I got here. And when I graduated, when I went to the University of Illinois, they said that you had to sign up for a Bachelor of Science degree in zoology in order to go to medical school. So I did that. I signed up for that. And but during the 60s, when I was in college and down at the university, it wasn't the doctors who were making the changes. It was the lawyers, guys like Thurgood Marshall. They were the ones. And so I said, well, wait a minute. I'm doing all right in zoology, but I would like to change my major and go to law school instead of medical school. They said, well, the only way you can graduate on time would be to continue to get your Bachelor of Science degree, but you can use that to go to law school, just like you can use that to go to medical school. So in college, I graduated with my zoology degree and went to law school, and my wife-to-be graduated with the zoology degree, and she went to medical school at the University of Illinois. So I became a lawyer, but I didn't give up on the medicine. I married a doctor. And that doctor, by the way, used to work in Maywood. Yeah. And so I went on to become a lawyer. And as you said, I worked in the city council with Harold Washington. I was his floor leader and chairman of his political office, but also I was the chairman of the budget committee and also the chairman of the finance committee. And all of the big committees, I chaired them. And I enjoyed that as much as anything in my life. And when I got through with that, the current president of the county board and I were always locked in political battles. And she challenged me 3 times. I won the first 2, and she won the last one. So she went on to become president of the county board, and I went on to become chief judge of the Circuit Court of Cook County.
So there was a place for both of you.
Absolutely.
A great place for both of you. Let me see how much time I have here. I don't think I have a whole lot of time left here, but so there was one question here about, how COVID affected your job. And I know that a number of people, it's kind of like there was a pause, as a result of COVID. So could you just wrap up with how are you back in the courtrooms? And what did you do? I know what we had to do in the clerk's office, but could you just share just a few minutes on how you got through that time?
Sure, absolutely. And first, let me rush to say we never closed. Like you said, we stayed open in spite of the coronavirus. But because it was killing people every night, and we knew that we had to exercise social distancing, 6 feet, and mask wearing and all of that, that's what we did. And we went to a system that enabled us to conduct the hearings virtually, called Zoom. And to start up the coronavirus, we only had 12 Zoom licenses. Each judge has to have a license to operate by Zoom to conduct his or her hearing virtually. And so we had to apply for and receive 400 licenses, separate licenses to operate Zoom hearings. And we went right on during the period. For example, during the big problem that we initially had from March 2020 to March 2021, we conducted 138,000 cases and thousands of pleas of guilty. We had jury trials all along. And so we never closed. And once again, I thank you for giving me an opportunity to comment on it, because people who were saying things that were just misinformed. And I had to tell the superintendent of the police department here in Chicago, who said we closed. We never closed. And the mayor of Chicago said we closed. I had to tell her we did not close. And I had to provide them with the statistics to show that. And so now that we have the Delta variant, people wonder, well, are you going to close now? And the answer is no. Justice continues every day. People are being arrested every night, every day, and we have to give them a hearing within 24 hours of their arrest. And so, no, we don't close, and we never have closed. And with the Delta variant, what we did was I talked to the physicians who are associated with the Board of Health in the county, Dr. Rachel Rubin, for example, and I asked her if it was necessary to continue to maintain the 6-foot social distancing now that we had gotten past these initial phases of the coronavirus. And she said no, that we could go from 6 feet social distancing down to 3 feet social distancing. And we could arrange our courtrooms so that the people, let's say, who came for jury duty would not be seated right next to each other. We could seat them apart, every other seat. And we could, if necessary, which is what we did do, we could spread the jurors out throughout the gallery in a courtroom. And gallery, of course, is where the members of the public would generally come and sit if they came to watch a case. What we did was we put the jurors out there, and we used a separate courtroom to beam the proceedings into, so that members of the public could see everything that was going on in the courtroom, but we would not violate the social distancing that the doctors were recommending. And so we did things like that for many months to make sure that we didn't close, and that we continued to operate our court so that access to justice would continue to go on. And that's what is going on today. We now have a hybrid system. Clerk, we have a system so that if a case needs to be conducted virtually by Zoom, we can do that. And if we know that our Constitution, back to this Democratic Republic issue that I told you about, there, the Constitution says the accused has a right to confront his accuser in person. So cases that have to be in person, we provide those, whether it's a jury in person or whether it's a bench trial in person, we do that. And then other hearings that don't have to be in person, we conduct those hearings by Zoom. For example, I've been focusing on the criminal side, but we have the civil side as well. Divorces and custody battles and in train crashes and automobile crashes and train crashes, anything. All of those are still going on day by day. And depending upon what the Constitution requires, you have those hearings in Zoom or we have them in person, depending upon what the law requires. And we do that every day, including today.
Wow. This has been very informative. It's been, thank you so much, Judge Evans. I think you just elucidated some things for people, everyday people. We don't think so much about all of what you do. And this protecting the Democratic Republic, I think we're going to zero in on that. Thank you for sharing that and the importance of us doing that. So somebody just said, what an interesting journey. I know my congressman is also from Arkansas, and he often says that when he said Arkansas was the only state in the Bible, he looked over the ark and saw, and every time he says
it sounds like Danny.
Yeah, but he also says that when he could get out of Arkansas, he got out of there because it just wasn't the place where he could grow and develop into the person. And I've known so many people from Arkansas who, left their home state and have really made a difference in the place. Wherever they went, they made a difference because they understood what it was like. And so I guess for all of us, if we haven't had the experience, we ask somebody has had the experience where they didn't get equal justice under the law. Things were not fair. And you take, for instance, in Illinois, if you do a crime and you do your time, you can get, be able to vote after you. And then the other thing is, I think we're the only jurisdiction where we have the folks, because I participated in the jail where we had these folks who wanted to vote, to allow them to vote. The pretrial folks. That was really amazing to see that process as it rolled out, and they wanted to be active and involved in the process. So we can't take any of this for granted. And I see our chief says, thank you, Chief Judge Evans, for leading our court system with honor and integrity. We thank you so much for being with us today. Our time was well spent, and I hope that we can look forward to in the future to call on you again.
I look forward to it as well, and thank you so much, Clerk Karen Yarborough, and all of your staff, and also the members of your Rotary Club. I was happy to hear that they were doing all these wonderful things in the community. I also heard about them having meetings at steakhouses and all of that. So they're taking very good care of their residents.
Join us. That's an open invitation to you.
Well, I appreciate that so much. And anytime you invite me, I assure you I will try my best to be here. It's a pleasure working with you, Clerk, and I thank you for your commitment to public service. I know it has not been easy for you. You combined, for example, two offices. We didn't get a chance to talk about it, but I know what you did in combining the Recorder of Deeds office and the county clerk's office. That had to be a headache. Everybody said it couldn't be done, but you did it. And I commend you for all your efforts, and congratulations again to you, to your staff, and thanks again for the invitation to be here today.